I built this building because the weather in the Hamakua is a little wetter and colder than in other parts of the island. And that helps a lot with the growing of the coffee and the ripening of the coffee, not so much with the drying of the coffee. So by building this building with plastic sheet walls and clear plastic roof, I capture all the solar radiation, and this room is about 20 degrees warmer than the ambient outside. And that helps to accelerate the drying so that I can get my beans dry as fast as possible, which is the key to keeping the flavor intact. We put in shelves that are a foot apart in elevation, from 1 foot off the ground up to 7 feet, and there are 115 of them. And I can fit about 20 pounds of coffee on each of the trays. And as you can see, they just dry right on these shelves. But I still try to get solar drying by keeping them out in the sun for 3 to 5 days, and we'll bring them in or cover them if it starts to get misty. But then after that's done and they're kind of damp dry, we'll bring them in here, and that allows them to speed dry. And then it's also a great temperature and humidity for storing them. And I can keep it in this parchment layer, the pergamino layer, for several months before we hull it and roast it. And it just keeps it just perfect, spot on moisture-wise, for a good roast, a good even roast. I tried to use as few chemicals in the building of this as possible. I didn't want to have any kind of smells taint the coffee. So it's just a lot of bare wood, and that also helps to absorb some of the moisture from the beans a little faster.
And what do we have right here in the foreground?
These are bags of coffee. After they've been on the shelf and dried for several weeks, I'm going to bag it up. And this is parchment coffee that will have this pergamino layer rubbed off, basically, is what happens. See, it's just like parchment paper. It's just crispy. And that comes off. And then there's a silver skin layer that's on the inside that just clings to it a little bit tighter. But when we put it through the huller, that layer also comes off. And you just get a nice, clean, blue-green bean that you then put in the roaster. And each of these bags has about 65 to 75 pounds in them. And I do that even though the standard is between 100 and 150 pounds to spare my back. but that's just me. So it means I have twice as many bags, but they're easier to lift. Here's a Peaberry. So out of those handfuls that I just had.
Keep holding it there. And again, the difference between the Peaberry and the regular coffee is what?
The Peaberry is when there's only one seed that forms inside the coffee fruit. And because there's only one seed that forms, it doesn't develop that flat side that the other beans have. The flat side forms because of the internal pressure of the fruit, and it creates the flat side, and then the rounded side of the coffee seed is the outside of the fruit. But in the case of a Peaberry, which in this year's crop is about 4% of the time, one of those two seeds died early in the process of development. It just formed a little wrapping around the remaining seed. And that seed, rather than having a flat side, bulges out and looks more like a football. And that's what they call the Peaberry. So all the nutrition that would normally go into the two seeds goes just into the one. And also because it's round, because it's bulged out, it rolls when it's being roasted. So you get a nice even roast. Whereas the flat-sided beans will sometimes get stuck on that flat side as they're roasting. And you'll get a charred side on the flat side and an under-roasted side on the rounded side. So the flavor is different in a Peaberry. First, because of the nutrition going into the one seed rather than two. Second, because of the rounding. And I suppose third, which is a function of the first. If you take this larger flat-sided seed and this smaller Peaberry seed and slice them and put them under a microscope and you're looking at the cross-section, the flat-sided seed looks like a sea sponge. and the Peaberry is much more dense. It look more like cork. There are still air holes, but there's a lot fewer of them. So it's a denser bean. So when you go to roast it, you're roasting more coffee and less air bubbles, which of course would give you more coffee flavor, a more intense layer of flavor, and then also give you more caffeine, which for some people is a huge plus, and for others is not as big of a bonus, but that is the case with Peaberry. So more intense flavor, smaller bean, and more of what people look for in coffee.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.